Society Asks. My name is Jennifer Grossman. My buddies know me as JAG. I am the CEO of the Atlas Society. We are the leading nonprofit organization connecting young people with the ideas of Ayn Rand in creative, accessible ways. Today, we have a real treat for you. We are honored to have Tim Draper join us. And of course, before I even begin to introduce him, we are streaming on multiple platforms. So if you're with us on Zoom, type your questions into the Q&A. If you are on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, just type them into the comments. We will get to as many of them as possible. So Tim Draper is a venture capitalist, a philanthropist, and a leading proponent of cryptocurrency. He is the founder of Draper Associates, Draper Fisher Jurvetson, and the Draper Venture Network. He is the author of How to Be a Startup Hero, whose audiobook I have listened to twice. It's really two books in one. It's both a practical blueprint for launching your own startup, but it's also a memoir of sorts and includes behind the scenes accounts of his investments in companies such as Skype, Hotmail, Tesla, Robinhood, SpaceX. The book also covers Tim's forays into policy reform, including advocating more parental choice in education and outside of the box thinking for reforming our home state of California. Tim has created BizWorld, which teaches young children how business works, and most famously, which we're going to discuss, Draper University of Heroes, a residential and online school based in San Mateo, California, just down the street. His students, his graduates have gone on to launch hundreds of innovative, disruptive startups. Tim, welcome again. Thank you so much for joining us.
Terrific, Jag. Thanks so much for having me. This is just so much fun. And whether you or somebody has read my book, no one's ever given an account of what it's really about. And the idea is to set up first, are you cut out to be an entrepreneurial hero? Are you cut out to be one? And then the last half is, okay, so you want to run a business, you've come this far, you want to run a business, here are my tips. So that has, it's so funny because I rarely hear anybody who's actually read it.
Well, yes, I have read it actually 3 times because I've read the hard copy, and I love audiobooks. And so and I also found it a rich trove of quotes, not just yours, but all of the inspirational quotes with which you begin the various chapters. So those are being memed as we speak, and we're going to also mine, maybe not mining Bitcoin, but we'll be mining insights from this webinar. And I do recall the passage that you have. You brought your students to meet Elon Musk. It was the day that he was really opening his factories and announcing his plans, and the governor was there, and so you may not have caught him on the best day, and he gave his advice to your students, don't do it, which could seem kind of like a downer, but the way that you interpreted it is that, like, if after knowing this is going to take a ton out of you, it's going to cost your time, your friendships, your family, and if you are undeterred, then you've got actually a much better shot.
Yeah, he looked at that as a real motivator for an entrepreneur, because the entrepreneur says, if somebody tells me not to do it, I know I can keep going and prove him wrong. And to the non-entrepreneurs, it's Elon Musk told me not to do it, so I'm back. Fortunately, most of the people who go to Draper University do become entrepreneurs, and most of them would take that advice to say, I'm going to do this anyway. And that was a great moment. It was also a wonderful opening. It was when they launched the Tesla S car, and I had bought the 5th one off the line, and it was a great ceremony, and it was really fun. And then I took all the Tesla employees for rides in my car, my new car, and each one had a story about, oh, I said, what did you do? Well, I designed the rear view mirror, or I designed the dashboard, or I designed the door handle, or the key, which looks like a car. And each one had incredible pride because that was the first day these things were launched. And you could tell something great was happening in this company. It was so unique, and sure has. Company's worth almost $500 billion now.
Now you tell the story of investing in Tesla, of getting that first ride in one of its early prototypes, and but you also talk about the benefits of having management of different temperaments, as you did with DFJ, and you thought this was great. You brought it to your team, and they were perhaps maybe looking a little bit back at, as you described, this graveyard of venture capital littered with so many failed attempts. But you saw something different, and you decided to go on and invest personally. So what was it that you saw?
I pushed the partnership, and then they said, okay, but a smaller amount. And they were probably wise there.
Right, because then it ran out of cash.
Because they did run out of money, and we had to come up with more. And Elon came up with more, and he joined the company and grew it from there. And at that point, it was, hey, sky's the limit, or no limit.
Right, sky is no longer the limit. Right? Colonize Mars.
They launched one of the Teslas into space. But yeah, I was exploring electric cars because another guy, Ian Wright, took me for a ride in an electric car, and he made me strap in with a 5-point star. And I thought, what? It's an electric car. I mean, it's like a golf cart, right? And he said, well, it's a little different. And we took off, and we went so fast. And then he came right up to a stop sign, and he stopped right on a dime. And I went, what? Oh my gosh, this is better. People are going to buy these, even if they're not tree huggers or golfers. They're going to want something like this. This is going to be, it's better performance. And so I thought, wow, those lines are going to cross. People are going to want the electric car more than the gas-powered car, and it worked out that way. It was a long shot. It was an expensive road, but boy, it sure worked out very well. And Ian Wright, we didn't back that one, but I followed all the hobbyists in that industry, and they all kind of mentioned Tesla. And so then we met with Martin Eberhard, who was the founder of Tesla at the time, and he told us all about how these lithium-ion batteries are great, but they explode, and so you need to be able to route around them in case one of them overheats. And the other benefit was that you could get a lot more torque because you could get all the batteries working in tandem to accelerate the car. And that was enough for me to really push it through the partnership. And eventually Steve Jurvetson got on board, and he was really excited about it. And then eventually he took the board seat. So, off he ran.
Well, I'm personally very grateful because I love my Tesla, and I'm just actually in a couple of weeks, I'm getting my Tesla solar panels and my Tesla power walls. So it's just spectacular. So of course, Tesla has revolutionized transportation, disrupted transportation, disrupting energy, disrupting space travel, and of course an area.
SpaceX, but it's the same guy.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly the same guy. And actually, one of our future Draw My Life videos is My Name is Mars. So we're taking that kind of optimistic vision that he has and applying it to a future story of Mars, and what are the things that could also endanger our ability to get there. and the same things that endanger our ability to launch entrepreneurial ventures. So those are disruptions. You have focused a lot and are well known for your leadership on Bitcoin, and I actually see you. We talk about wearing what we love on our heart. I'm wearing the dollar sign. What's going on there? That is.
So this is a Bitcoin tie, and it was given to me by the Amador Valley High School Investment Club, because a very bright guy came to me and he asked if I would come speak to his high school, and his investment club at his high school. And I thought, well, yeah, I'll do it on a whim. And I went over there, and he gave me this tie, and I've worn it so many times since. It's just been a good mission for me to spread the good word around Bitcoin and how it's going to make our world a better place, decentralize the earth, make geographic borders less relevant, improve our lives, build wealth, build value around the country and around the world. It really does have that potential. And so I have continued to just pound just beat the drum. And it seems as though that drum roll just gets louder and louder and louder and louder. I was a voice in the forest for a while, and now it seems like every fiduciary is now looking at Bitcoin and saying, we have to own this asset class because it doesn't correlate with any other asset classes. And it's a nice hedge against inflation. And I make the point that it's also a hedge against bad governance, and it forces governments to shape up. And if they say, oh, Bitcoin's, a bad thing like China did, then Japan opens up and says, well, we're making Bitcoin a national currency. And there's a brain drain out of China going into Japan. And it starts this sense that it's keeping governments in check, and the governments that overregulate it do it at their own peril, because a government next door is willing to embrace it. And if the U.S. had not embraced the internet and let it rip, we would have missed out on trillions and trillions of dollars of value and so many great consumer products and so much human development. Well, the same thing is happening now, and I think governments that over restrict are the ones who are hurting their own people at their own self-aggrandizement. So the ones who are open are helping their entire economy. And I think the ones that are open now are the ones that are going to take us, they're over the next 40 years are going to be the big winners, just as the US was a big winner because they became the first democracy, the first free place to live. The US benefited in a big way. Same thing is now happening with whatever countries open up around Bitcoin. It was interesting. Switzerland started out saying, sure, we'll do a few of these and see how they go. And then they clamped down on it. And they said, we're going to do this regulation and this regulation. And then all the new technologies started to go to Malta and Gibraltar, Singapore, other places. And then Switzerland said, whoa, hey, we better shape up. And then they lightened up on the regulations, and they started to encourage more activity in their country. And look, these technologies, the Bitcoin, the blockchain that comes from it, that keeps perfect records, smart contracts, those are enough to transform anything tied to money or data. So we're gonna see the transformation of not just currency, but banking and commerce and insurance and any number of other fields that are all tied to having data. And then there are all these new applications that are coming after, like out of NFTs, where you can document ownership of something that is permanent, and then you can trade that thing. And then when you combine it with artificial intelligence and surveillance, then you start transforming the insurance industry, and that's another industry. And then when you combine it with with digitizing the healthcare world, you have another multi-trillion-dollar industry. And if you change insurance, what's really interesting is that you change government, because what is government? It's like 80% insurance programs. It's your healthcare insurance, your workman's comp insurance, your Medicare, your your welfare, your unemployment insurance. It's all those insurance companies. Well, if you can create a better insurance company just by using Bitcoin, the blockchain, smart contracts, and some surveillance, you don't need all of that heavy government. You can have a very light touch government and treat everyone the same and provide that safety and security to everyone around you. And maybe not just everyone in your geographic area, but everyone around the planet, because there's no reason that those services can't be provided cross-border. So this is the beginning of something really extraordinary. Imagine an insurance company that, instead of saying, well, you pay your premium, you pay your premium, pay your premium, then you issue a claim, then you go to our legal department, you fight, and then you get something. Well, compare that with you pay your premium, you pay your premium, you pay your premium. The surveillance sees that your house is burned down. Here's your check, or here's your Bitcoin. It is in your wallet right now before you even knew your house burned down. That kind of thing and that kind of thinking will attract all the customers everywhere. And that kind of thinking then can make governments much better service providers. And I think of government as a service providing. I think it needs to be provided as opposed to these people in government that are saying, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to wear a mask, you have to, and lock in place. And, I think freedom just works so much better. And all you have to do is look at Korea. You look at South Korea. Well, my dad fought in Korea, and after the war, they drew the demilitarized zone. And in North Korea, they were Marxists. They were all focused on a socialist dictatorship. Every government tells everybody what they have to do. Everybody does exactly what the government tells them, or else. And then in South Korea, it was a democracy, free market, capitalistic society. And what happened? Okay, that line has kept those people apart for about 70 years. What's happened in 70 years? Well, the average South Korean is now worth 460 times what the average North Korean is worth. And that includes purchasing power. 460 times. They live 460 times better than the average North Korean. And here's the real clincher. The average South Korean is 4 inches taller than the average North Korean today. And hey, if that isn't an argument for freedom, I don't know what is. And so whenever the government says, you have to do this or you have to do that, I think we should all take a pause and say, is this the right thing for us? Or do we need to keep our freedom? And I tend to be a believer that freedom creates a great society, an innovative economy, wealth for the people, a better life, a better environment, better healthcare, better education. The more free a society is, the better all of that is, because people can innovate, they can try things, they can test one thing, move on, and people learn and grow at a much faster rate. So that was a long answer to a short
That was great. And one of the examples that you gave of Switzerland and the experience with Bitcoin, its early openness, and then clamping down, and then seeing a kind of a brain drain or human capital flight to these other countries. One of the themes that you have, I think, consistently emphasized throughout is competition and choice, and that's competition for human capital, for financial capital, and people having the ability to vote, to change states, to change residence, to change even nationality, and I guess my question is, we saw recently Janet Yellen calling for a minimum corporate tax throughout the world, because she wants us to raise our corporate tax rate. And at least, I guess, the one encouraging thing about that is, for so often that those who've wanted to raise taxes have argued, oh, well, it doesn't, tax rates don't have any impact. Higher taxes aren't going to have any effect on people's behavior. Well, she's acknowledging that it will have an effect. And unfortunately, she wants to kind of price fix or tax fix so that we wouldn't have that mobility and that kind of experimentation of people going to where they can get the best return on their investment. I guess I'd like to know what you see the impact of the change in administration. Do you expect that it's going to have an impact on the growth of cryptocurrency adoption and innovation in the United States? Janet Yellen, Biden's Secretary of Treasury, has also raised questions about Bitcoin's legitimacy and stability, and kind of spoken ominously about the dangers she says that the currency poses. What do you have concerns?
Well, I think she was the head of the Fed. And if you're the head of the Fed, all you're thinking about are dollars. That's all you think about. You think about how do we manage the interest rate so that the inflation rate doesn't go too high, and so that we can have maximum growth. And she's thinking about that. And this Bitcoin thing came from the side, and she was kind of thinking, what is this thing? Why are people using something else as currency? Why aren't they just using the dollar? But now she is the Secretary of the Treasury, and she has to think of all the people in the country, and how do I help all the people in the country? And so she has to start weighing the innovation and the attractiveness of the United States against trying to sort of control the money supply. And I think controlling the money supply, again, is probably not the best answer, because Bitcoin's just better. And people say, well, it's volatile. And I go, well, yeah, one Bitcoin is always going to be one Bitcoin. And there are only 21 million of them. And all these other currencies are going to be very volatile as they slowly disappear from the map. There is no reason that we should have when we've got a currency that is trusted, decentralized, open, transparent, can provide things like micropayments and cross-border payments very quickly and effectively, and just do it right on the internet, and it just goes. That why are we thinking that we're going to have a currency that is tied to a political decision or political the swings of power, and some of them print money and some of them restrict the printing of money? And why do that when we know that we already have a trusted third party now, and it's getting more and more trust in the system? Bitcoin has been money with a whole bunch of hackers trying to hack it, and no one has been able to hack, knock on wood, the Bitcoin blockchain. So it is more secure. Your banks are getting hacked all the time, so it's more secure than your bank. It's more secure than your bank backed by the government's promise of refunding your money. The government's just printed trillions of dollars. What does that do? Makes all of our dollars worth less because there are more of them out there. I mean, if you're the only game in town, then everybody comes to your door. But if there are 50 of you, then they don't all come to your door. Well, now we've got a currency where you might build something of value, and then if the government just prints money, then the value you've created is less. And I think I'm going to get into my other kind of key theme, and that is trust. Singapore used to be maybe the poorest country in the world and the least trustworthy. There was crime everywhere. It was just a mess. Then Lee Kuan Yew came in there, and that was about 70 years ago, 60, 70 years ago. And he just built trust one brick at a time into that system. And now the Singapore people by far are the most trustworthy people on the planet. And they're the richest. So they've gone from the poorest to the richest, building on trust. Okay, so where is there trust and where is there not trust? Well, a lot of trust in Singapore. Well, if you live in certain parts of Africa and they've got a dictator, a socialist dictator who just takes everything whenever it's built, then you have no incentive to build anything of value. If you build something of value, they come in there and they take it either with guns, or in the case of Nigeria, they just print more money, and that money drops in value about 75% a year. So why would you want to build something in Nigerian naira or Argentinian pesos of any great value? You know that it's going to drop in value immediately, and it's like their money is like a hot potato. Well, that's not true of the US dollar yet. But once we have inflation, I've seen this happen before under Jimmy Carter, where it's a downward spiral and people have less incentive to build something of value if they know that it's going to drop, that whatever they build is going to be dropping in value over that time. So I think Janet Yellen, now thinking for the entire country and not just thinking about her old job, thinking for the entire country, she's going to want to build a base where people have trust and they want to work there and build something of value. And Bitcoin is just a better way to build that value. It's just, and I mean, Kat, if you're 35 or younger, and I give you the choice, $58,000 or one Bitcoin, they all take one Bitcoin. And if they're older, they all take the dollars. And what's happening is all of these young people are seeing that this is the wave of the future. People have asked me, you got all that Bitcoin, so when are you going to sell it? And I say, into what? Why would I take the currency of the future, the currency of the now and the future, and trade that for the currency of the past? It would be like taking my euros and turning them into drachma, or or taking US dollars and turning them into Confederate dollars. It doesn't make any sense. I'm saying the future is a very bright future. And most of the people who are younger and excited about this new future understand it, and they want to be a part of it. And then these older people are trying to either cling to the past or whatever, and they're hurting if you're in government and you're trying to cling to the past, you are hurting your people. And I think that Janet Yellen and all the rest of the administration, the new administration, should and do. I think they're thinking out. They're generally thinking for the good of the country. Make sure that we are a trusted source and a free source of governance. And if they're trusted and free, we're going to continue this amazing influx of the brightest and best people from around the world creating all this great value. And we're also going to innovate like crazy because we'll know that we can hold the value. So rather than saying, you know, poo-poo, whatever on Bitcoin, they should either be improving the dollar or making Bitcoin a national currency too, the way Japan did. And it's very simple to do. All you really need to do is, we have a company called Cryptio that does all the accounting, and they can tax in Bitcoin. And so you build your business completely in Bitcoin, you can get taxed in Bitcoin, and the US government probably make more money. They'd probably be better off. And so would all of those entrepreneurs, and so all those people who are trying to build something of value in this new way of doing things. And it's great. I mean, we've crossed the chasm. Bitcoin was a fringe, crazy, wild thing, and the stories were amazing. Somebody paid $2 million worth of Bitcoin for a pizza, and the Mt. Gox, the biggest exchange, just basically disappeared the money. And you'd think that that would be the end of a currency, but clearly this currency is needed. It's needed for the unbanked. There are a lot of people who can't afford a bank account. I mean, the banks don't want you unless you're going to put like $1,000 into the bank. They don't want you. And so then they don't bank you. And then you're unbanked and you're part of this weird economy. Well, Bitcoin's available for you if you're a part of that economy. And if you were, you've probably already benefited from it.
So
and then let's say you're Lucasfilm and you got to pay 15,000 people who worked on a Star Wars movie every time somebody swipes a credit card and pays for a movie. Well, the great news there is that can all be honest. Now, some of those Hollywood types probably are saying, wait, honest? But it can be completely honest. That $20 that somebody pays to see the movie can immediately go all the way through the waterfall and have a certain amount of Bitcoin just dropped into everybody's wallet, and they will always be paid the amount they are owed. I've gotten checks from Hollywood, it costs about $8 to send a check. I've gotten checks for 26 cents from Hollywood. And I'm thinking, this is so stupid. But now they have a solution. Now they have a better option. And now retailers are starting to accept Bitcoin. You use OpenNode. If you're a retailer, you can accept Bitcoin, and you can have the transaction speeds can be faster than the Visa network. So that's exciting too.
Well, I am excited to say that the Atlas Society now accepts Bitcoin donations, and what you just shared something that will influence my thinking on this, because it's new. It's something that we've done in the past few months, and I've got our trustees, and they're saying, well, okay, well, once those donations come in, you need to cash them out and get the dollars, but we'll see.
No.
Yeah.
I have two. We've been taking Bitcoin at Draper University. We have a program for entrepreneurs. It's a 5-week program, and we turn ordinary people into great entrepreneurs. And they've come from 100 countries, and we've started 500 companies out of that. But we agreed to take Bitcoin about 4 or 5 years ago.
Wow.
And
we are late.
And it's paid for the 2 guys paid in Bitcoin, paid for the all the money I've put into Draper University. I pay about $2 million a year. Those 2 people, now that's $10 million. So, and I think this just is going to continue. So I would say, yeah, you accept it and you keep it in a Coinbase account and you keep turning your dollars into Bitcoin, and you'll be much better off. I think
All right.
Ayn Anne Rand would love you for it. She knows this is a natural for her.
I completely agree. Now, I was also interested by how, just in the same way that you got interested in Tesla, reading the story of what started your interest in Bitcoin. And if I understand correctly, it was when, you realized that one of the ways that multiplayer games were monetizing was by selling virtual products, like virtual weapons within their virtual world. And that got you started thinking about it. And you had an early foray into Bitcoin, and you yourself did experience some of the pitfalls of what can happen. But walk us through a little bit about your origin story with Bitcoin.
Yeah, for me, it was this Korean guy who said, "Hey, everybody's playing this game. It's called Legacy or something like that, Lineage." And I said, "Well, that's great." And he said, "Yeah, it's so important in Korea that I have hired a guy to be my avatar in the game while I go to work in the real world." So he felt that it was as important to keep going in the virtual world as it was to keep his business going in the real world. And this is a very brilliant man. And he bought his son a sword for his birthday. And I said, "The sword?" Yeah. He said, "Yeah, it's pixels on the screen." And I paid real, cash for it. And I started to think virtual product, real money or fiat money. And I started to put that together, and I thought, oh, wow, there's going to be all this virtual money in all these multiplayer games. And somebody's going to figure out that you can take the money from one game and convert it somehow to another game, another game, another game. And you're going to have virtual money that works for everything. And it didn't happen that way. It turned out Bitcoin came from nowhere, and it was digital money, and I was looking for digital money. I was looking for something that would happen there. And yeah, this is a heartbreaker. I paid $250,000 at $6 a Bitcoin, and that money just disappeared. And that's why I thought it was over. But then Bitcoin's value only dropped about 15% on that news. And so what that did was it made me realize this is really important to a lot of people. If somebody's taken that much money out of this system and the currency is still an actively traded currency, something's going on out there. And so I dug in, and that's where I found that people were using it for remittance, cross-border. They were using it to pay employees in other countries, pay for supplies in other countries where they didn't have bank accounts. They were using it for micropayments where people didn't know how much they would owe, but it was a formulaic thing, and they would have to just drop it in over time. And this was an easy way to do it with a smart contract. And then I thought about it, and I thought, wow, we haven't had a change in the technology of currency since they created the Federal Reserve note and dropped the gold standard. That was a long time ago. So it was ripe for the picking. And when the U.S. Marshal's Office auctioned off their Bitcoin, I bid over market. And I looked pretty stupid there for a while because it went from 632 down to like 180. But the price clearly has come soaring back, and it's all in fits and starts. It comes, it goes, it comes and goes. But that's relative to the dollar. As I say, it's the dollar that's volatile as it slowly disappears from use. It's not just the dollar. All these currencies, and the first ones to go are going to be the Naira, the Argentinian peso, the Venezuelan Bolivar, the ones that nobody has any trust in. And eventually that's going to work its way up to the US dollar and the euro and the yen.
Fascinating. All right, well, let's get to some of our audience questions because this has just flown by and we have less than 20 minutes left. Vicky says she had read that you were an early investor in Robinhood. What is your take on what happened with Wall Street Bets and GameStop? I mean, for the uninitiated,
GameStop.
it's pretty.
That was fascinating. That was, and you know, if you're a Atlas Society member, you understand supply and demand very well. Well, what happens in the world is that when a company's going down, and people feel like that's going to go to zero, then they'll short the stock, which means that they sell stock they don't own. Well, these clever guys on Reddit recognized that the GameStop actually had more short interest than the value of the company. And so the short interest was so high that what would happen if people started to buy it is that those people would have to cover their short interest, which means they have to buy it. And then it just keeps going up. And there's nothing stopping that from going up. And so GameStop took off like this wild, you know, and GameStop, it was a bunch of retail stores that were selling video games that were in cartridges and CD-ROMs. I mean, it was on its way out. And all of a sudden, there's this big burst of activity around GameStop just because this clever guy had figured this out. And then he told all his Reddit friends, and then they created this huge interest in GameStop. Well, it got so big and it was growing so out of control that it started to hit the, you know, all of these brokerage houses are regulated, heavily regulated, and too heavily regulated, if you ask me, but they're heavily regulated. And so when GameStop started to be this thing, they had to, and since Robinhood and E-Trade and Schwab, they all, you know, they allow the individual investor to buy at the market, whatever that market is. Well, the market just kept going and going and going. And some of these ratios started to change to where they had to halt trading. And then that angered a lot of people who were buying the GameStop because that stops the trading. So the price stays right there. It doesn't keep going up. Yeah. And that angered people. But if you want to blame somebody, you blame the government. You know, it's really interesting. Somehow the government allowed us to blame the banks for the loan problem that we had in 2008. That was, the government said to the businesses, we'll guarantee the loans. You just make them. Make those loans. I don't care if they're high risk loans, you make them. We'll guarantee them. And so the banks went out and made those loans. And of course, those loans weren't any good. And then the banks get blamed. This is the same situation. The government should be blamed. They're the ones who set those regulations in motion. They made it so that GameStop, that the brokerage houses had to stop trading. It was, you know, you know, the villain is as they say, you're looking
blame
for
the victim.
Problem.
Blame
the problem
victim.
is us.
Yeah.
Because we're the government.
Well, so
but anyway, that was a fascinating, amazing run. And it also kind of put a check on the short traders, you know, these guys who have made a living off of just shorting things as they're going out of business. There's always hope. And hey, GameStop has some hope. Now they've got $10 million or something. So they actually do have hope. They can do whatever. They can buy a game company.
Reinvent themselves.
Yeah.
Make it all.
And think of the branding they've gotten out of this. That's got to be worth something.
It's pretty amazing. So another company that you've been involved with and that had been in the news, perhaps, you know, unfairly, is one that reminds me a lot of the Atlas Shrugged. You wrote the Atlas Society, and the book, our book, Atlas Shrugged, tells the story of these extraordinary entrepreneurs who are often vilified for their innovations, even though they are, the atlases that are holding the world aloft. And that was when I was reading about your account of being an early investor in Theranos. It reminded me a bit of Ayn Rand's, observation that thousands of years ago, the first man who discovered how to make fire was probably burned at the stake by the fire that he taught his brothers to light. You knew Elizabeth Holmes. You knew her. She walked into your office when she was 19 years old with this idea. Is this kind of vilification sort of what happened to Elizabeth Holmes? Is it kind of a modern day witch hunt?
Well, it's something like that. But here's what it is. An entrepreneur starts a business. If that business becomes pretty big, nobody cares. If it becomes so big that it changes the lives, the jobs of all these other people, if it affects a really big industry, that industry is going to fight back. And think of what healthcare. This is a low-cost testing system, uses low cost in money, low cost in blood. It's and by the way, it's happening now. I mean, they only were able to delay it, but it's going to happen anyway. They it happened in taxi. Where the taxis came after Uber. The car companies came after Tesla. If you get big enough, they figure out some way to attack. The banks went after Bitcoin. Now, of course,
hotels went after Airbnb.
Hotels went after Airbnb. It always happens because they say that's our competitor. They're eating our lunch. What do we do about it? And I remember this bitter guy who gets up and he says, "We've been in this business for 40 years and her company's worth more than ours is." And it was like this just vitriol, awful feeling.
Envy.
And that was, And so of course, how do you attack? You attack first by ignoring it, and then it doesn't go away. And then you attack by ganging up against it, where, not only the testing companies, but the drug companies didn't like this. It was going to lower the cost of drugs. People were going to have much better understanding of what their blood tests were over time. There were a lot of interesting things happening. The doctors don't like it. The insurance companies really don't like it because it costs a lot less. And so you get the attacks. Well, this attack came in the form of a writer for the Wall Street Journal who just kept pounding the message that the competitors were sending. And eventually it got to be such a big deal that the government had to say, hey, what's going on here? What's wrong? And they came in and they when you start getting the government poking around in your business, you're going to make a mistake. And I think she did. And I think then second mistake, she surrounded herself with lawyers rather than a PR firm. And the lawyers, are all spinning their wheels and spending her money on what's legal and what's not. And by the way, when you're an entrepreneur, you're setting a new legality. You don't know what the law is going to be around this new thing. And you have to kind of work to get to the place you want to go. And I think she got scared. And, when you get scared, you rely too much on your lawyer. I mean, there's a point there where she was spending more on her legal bills per month than we do investing. I mean, a huge, huge, huge amount of money on our legal bills. And whereas, you see other alternatives, what happened with Airbnb, all the customers came rising up. She didn't have enough customers to make them rise up. There were a lot of moms that were really happy with this pinprick instead of like going into the vein. And it wasn't, there weren't enough, even if they were yelling at the top of their lungs, there weren't enough to support her as she got systematically taken down by, the lawyers, the government, the PR, lawsuits, the whole thing. And anyway, you see it every time. And I warn, when they come to Draper University, I say, that's our warning story.
Mhm.
Look, when you get big, fine. When you get really big, you're going to affect an industry, and usually it's an oligopoly that likes it the way it is, and they're providing bad service at a high cost, and they will defend themselves to the death. And you need to know how to fight back.
Mhm.
I mean, Elon was brilliant there. The papers came after him, said this car doesn't make it in cold weather, and he said, "What do you mean it doesn't?" And then he realized that he can track where all the cars are, and it was the writer drove around in a parking lot so that he'd run out of battery so that he could prove his story. and Elon called him on it, and somehow the New York Times didn't fire that writer, but he should have.
Amazing.
And entrepreneurs need to use that. The press comes from that to say, yes, it's not the same result you get from one of these competitors, but it's good, and we can do it over time, and it doesn't hurt the person as much because you don't take as much blood, and blah, 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 blah. That would have been the approach to win the argument, win the hearts and minds of the people. But as it is, boy, poor Elizabeth. Fear, you're a reader. Maybe you've read Dune.
Oh,
Fear is
yes.
the
Fear
mind
is the mind
killer.
killer. I will let
Yeah.
the fear pass over me and through me, and in my inner mind eye, I will look back, and where the fear has gone, only I will remain. So it's wonderful. So Tim, you probably won't remember, but I do, because I was at a more impressionable age. Our paths first crossed when I worked for Ted Forsman, which was in the 90s. And
I remember meeting you.
yeah, it
That's
was at
weird.
one of the Forsman
You
Living
were at one of the
Conferences.
events, that great
Yeah,
event he had for school
in
vouchers.
Aspen. Yeah,
Yeah.
he used to host, but I was working, so I was in the background. And I remember, that was the time, the 1990s. It was just a thrilling time for venture capital, and everybody
Still
was
is.
just. Well, so talk a little bit about that, because things have changed. We had the early 2000s, and you talked about this kind of going through this valley of going from heroes to zeros. You guys recovered and rebounded, in particular, given that you had made an emphasis of overseas and international expansion. But how has it changed? What are the things that you know now that you might have done differently? And yeah.
Well, people ask what's your biggest regret, and it's the paths I didn't take. It's not the paths I took. It's not backing a few companies. I made a huge mistake not to back Netflix, for instance. And I said, wait, you're going to send DVDs through the US mail, and that's going to be a thing? And we're a year from now, we're all going to be streaming anyway. So why are you doing that? And he said, well, they're not ready for that. And I need to build my customer base. And that was right. I should have understood. Anyway, so there are many like that. I've missed many great companies for a variety of reasons, some of which I did have control over and some I didn't. It was partner decision. And I'd say, really the first part of this question was where venture capital has gone. Well, it's interesting. It started with just like when my grandfather and my dad got started. My grandfather was the first venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. My dad was one of the pioneers of venture capital. That was kind of a clubby environment. There are a few of them. They'd kind of get together and say, okay, I'll put up some of the money, you put up some of the money, and the money will take half and the entrepreneur will take half, and let's just see how it goes. And that really changed when the results were so good. And all of a sudden, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley and Merrill Lynch were coming out to California to see how these guys were doing. And then they got a law changed, and that changed so that it was, as a fiduciary, you are not only allowed to, but encouraged to some portion of your money in venture capital. And that was a huge influx of money. And then the ideas followed and the businesses, the entrepreneurs followed, and they said, well, wow, that guy made money. I can do that. I met him. I can do better than that. And so it really grew out the Silicon Valley. Well, then the other thing that happened was more and more people saw how great it was to be a venture capitalist, what a variety and interesting thing that it is to do, and how great it is to be an entrepreneur. And so that has proliferated. That has blown up everywhere and around the world. And that was kind of one of my missions when I got started, was to spread venture capital and entrepreneurship around the world. And it's been fun to do. I've gotten to see the world. And it's been
and you're bringing the world to you too, because so many of your students at the Draper University are international. So.
Oh yeah, and moving forward, I think anyone can be a venture capitalist. Anyone can be an entrepreneur, and I think we will all be both eventually. I think we will come to a point where we'll all be both, and that'll be a real breakthrough. And I think our global society will grow at a very fast and healthy clip when we do that. And we'll also have extraordinary ideas that ordinarily entrepreneurs might not have had. And that comes from the collaboration. It's competition and collaboration. It's really interesting, but you learn from your competitors. And when entrepreneurs fail, I always say, hey, why are you so down? And they say, well, it didn't work. And I said, well, God, you moved the ball. Think of all the people who've learned because you came out there with this really interesting thing, and think of all your competitors who are doing, different things, and some of them are doing very well with what you were trying to get done. So feel good about it. And I think that is starting to permeate the society too.
It certainly permeates your book, How to Be a Startup Hero. It is optimistic in a time when we really need some data-driven optimism and experience-driven optimism. So I want to again encourage. We're going to put it into the chat. Let's put it on all of the social media platforms on where you can go to buy the book. And then Tim, where's the best place to follow you and your exploits?
Oh, well, you can see I'm on Twitter. I'm Tim Draper on Twitter. I think I'm Timothy Draper on LinkedIn and Tim Draper on Facebook. And I mostly, I usually put it up on all three, whatever it is, but probably best to follow me on Twitter at Tim Draper. And then every once in a while, I'll do something weird, like I did a Clubhouse the other day. And we have a show called Meet the Drapers. And I
Right.
do it with my dad and my sister and my daughter, and now my son is also getting involved. And then we bring in guest judges who are really extraordinary. Vivek Ranadive, who runs the Kings, Ronnie Lott, who was a Super Bowl hero and created an amazing career after that. And a number of, the first woman who paid to go live in the space station for 11 days. And she said, hey, yeah, I said, well, what was the biggest surprise? And she said, washing my hair. I had to, there was a ball of water floating through the air, and I had to get my head under that ball of water to get my hair washed. But we've had great guest judges. We've also had amazing entrepreneurs. Now we're in the thousands of entrepreneurs who apply to be on the show. And the show, if you're one of the winners, it's really interesting. It's like, think of Shark Tank, but then the viewers can invest. So we do this crowdfunding thing. So the viewer can go ahead and invest in these companies if they see something of value. And so that has been great. And for the companies who've been on it, at first we had $1 million maximum because of the crowdfunding rules, but those rules have jumped to 5 million as a maximum. And so now these companies are getting real money to get their business started by coming on the show Meet the Drapers. So yeah, you can see that on Draper TV, draper.tv, I think. And you can see it on meetthedrapers.com. So that's another way you can follow me. We do have 10 million viewers now, so we're bigger than Shark Tank, but we're not bigger in the U.S. We have a huge following in India and other countries.
All right. Well, we're
very
going to
exciting.
check it out. That sounds like a lot of fun. I've seen the opening, and this is a very creative guy. He writes poetry, he writes songs. So he is the Renaissance man that his mother always wanted him to be. And
that's right. You did read this book. Good for you.
maybe just we will see. Well, I'll talk to the real power behind the throne. I'll talk to Karen about getting Tim to come out to our gala in Malibu in November. We had Peter Diamandis as the honoree last year, and we have Peter Thiel as the honoree.
Wow, that's fantastic. I love that. Actually, Diamandis is fantastic too. You really do well.
Well,
you know how to get
a lot of Ayn Rand fans out there, and just a lot of persistence and people who share just really, like you, an optimistic view about what's possible, because I think it's really too easy to get kind of distracted with what's not going right. There's so much.
Don't
you just
watch
have to take
the
a
news.
dynamic.
Avoid
Yeah, turn it off.
news.
Turn it off. Yeah.
Yeah, read The Economist once a week. You'll figure out everything that's going
enough.
on. Or Financial Times, just read that once in a while. Don't watch the news. It'll ruin your life. And you'll live in fear.
That's one of the
you're never going to do anything.
Peter's advice, Peter Diamandis' advice, just turn off the news. And I couldn't agree more. So turn off the news, turn on Meet the Drapers, and then tune in next week. We're going to be interviewing Professor Jason Hill, who's an objectivist scholar, and it'll be fun, but a hard act to follow. So thank you, Tim. Thank you, Karen, and we'll be following you.
Terrific. Thank you, Jag. That's terrific. And Karen did hear you. She's right over here.
All right.
And to the Atlas Society, I do love the book. I've read that one. I thought it was fantastic. I read Fountainhead too. You guys, I like that you're following her way of thinking. It's great. So keep at it.
Will do. Thank you,
Okay.
Tim. Bye.
Okay. Let me know when the Malibu thing is.
I will do November 4th, but I'll follow up. Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.